Our next feature story is with Senator Sherrod Brown. Our special guest host, Amanda Mangan, caught up with him to get his thoughts on the upcoming Farm Bill and more.
So first off, where does the Farm Bill stand currently?
I spent an hour, probably an hour and a half yesterday in the office of the chair of the committee, Senator Stabenow from Michigan. We're pushing to move. We know a couple things. We know that we're not going to do a bill just for the sake of a bill, because the bill 5 years ago set a good baseline. It generally gets us going in the right direction. We got, I believe, more votes 5 years ago, bipartisan votes on this farm bill than maybe than we'd ever gotten, certainly that we'd gotten in the last few farm bills. So it's not desperate that we move on it, but we ought to be moving on it. There are a lot of provisions that Chair Stabenow met with me to talk about Ohio and our provisions, and we will keep pushing.
And you were just in Northeast Ohio this past weekend. What did you hear from constituents during your visit about the Farm Bill?
Well, I hear people, to me, much of what I hear from farmers, whether it's in Medina County or whether it's in Wayne. I was at a dairy farm in Wayne a couple months ago, did a roundtable there. As the way I kind of collect information is, rather than doing these town halls where people yell at each other, these big town halls at Cloverleaf High School or Cleveland or wherever, I do smaller events with a number of people that can kind of teach me things and tell me things. And so the idea is essentially for every farm bill, I got on the Ag Committee when I first came to the Senate. It's the least partisan, most bipartisan committee in the Senate. Ohio's not had a member on the Agriculture Committee for years. And I know 1 out of 7 jobs in Ohio is related to food, from restaurants to dairy farms. And so I talked to this farmer in Wayne County about, just about milk prices and what we do. And he happens to be an organic farmer. But what I hear mostly is, how do we expand markets? And that's one reason I'm interested in the E15 issue that just came up again, from issues like jet fuel to tire production. Believe it or not, at Goodyear, there are real opportunities in biomass, real opportunities that can turn farm products into something else. And that, to me, is one of the ways to increase markets. And another way to increase markets is what we've done, and I've done this. Everything in the committee is pretty bipartisan. I find a Republican member of the committee, and we work on whether it's issues of conservation for Lake Erie, whether it's expanding markets, whether it's our school food to school program. I want part of this emphasis, and again, expanding markets, is selling as much locally grown food, locally produced food as possible. I want kids in Mansfield, where I grew up, or in Lima, or in Chillicothe. It's whenever possible, they're eating their school lunches from local produce. It's more nutritious. It's better for the climate. It's better for local farmers and local community prosperity.
Some of the things that we've heard in the ag community that are concerns with the Farm Bill are the estate tax, also whether or not there'll be funding for HBCUs like Central State University to expand their ag program and their extension programs, and concerns over programs for H-2A workers. So can you address any of those concerns when it comes to the Farm Bill and how those will be handled?
Sure. HBCUs is a big bipartisan interest. I've teamed up with a Republican from, I believe, Arkansas, right? I think it was Bozeman, wasn't it? In the HBCUs, I can't remember, but I always find somebody, and I think it was Bozeman here, who's the ranking member of the committee. I know he supports our efforts if he's not the main co-sponsor, but to help with general, not just Central State in Ohio, but other HBCUs around the country want to either scale up or start ag programs. I've been to that campus to talk about it. That's important to me. I think it's important to agriculture. I think it'll bring a diversity of farmers when there aren't a lot of opportunities in a state like ours. So that's something that I'm really interested in. The estate tax, we're in the process of a tax bill right now. Estate tax. My commitment, as I think has always been, how do we preserve family agriculture? How do we preserve family farms? I worked on a family farm near Lexington, right on the edge of Richland, Morrill counties. when I was growing up. It's really where I learned to work. I also realized that, you can't milk 4 times on Saturday and take Sunday off. We milked Guernseys and Holsteins in those days. I know there aren't any Guernsey herds anymore, but they the family farm preservation is really important to me. The tax bill now going through the Senate and the House, passed the House overwhelmingly, didn't include any changes in estate tax, but it did. One of the provisions in it that I got in it that's really important to our state, a small number of people in a smaller corner of the state, is those people in East Palestine, a town of about 5,000, with a number of farms nearby, and we were concerned with milk contamination and soil contamination because of the fire. I mean, the explosion and the controlled fire and the chemicals. We think most of that's worked out, but one of the problems is almost every resident got some amount of money from Norfolk Southern, really reimbursement for their problems and the damage. And they got hit with a tax bill this year. It's nobody's fault. It was the federal tax code says you get income, you get taxed, and I have a provision in this to wipe away any tax liability that people in East Palestine may have been burdened with. So that's in our tax bill, a number of other things too, but the estate tax is not addressed in it either way.
And another concern too that you've addressed and looked at is making sure that there's more transparency when it comes to farmland being bought up by foreign entities. And it's so important to keep Ohio farmland, whether it's family farms, and keeping them in the hands of families, or just keeping farmland in Ohioans' hands, right?
Yeah, part of my whole view that family farms, we need to do all we can to protect family farms. And we know the problem in part is we don't know when foreigners come in, or even not necessarily foreigners, when people come in and buy Ohio farmland, buy American farmland, we often don't know who the purchaser is. And they can aggregate a whole bunch of farms in a certain area. And the community, even the farmer doesn't really know, and the neighbors don't really know who's buying it. So we came across, not because the government has collected the data, it doesn't, a farm purchase in pieces of 200,000 acres by a Chinese, I assume Chinese communist businessman or Chinese communist entity. It bought 200,000 acres in I believe in Eastern Oregon somewhere. And we didn't know about it until some people in your profession, some aggressive journalists, figured it out. So one bill I'm working on is requiring land purchases that the disclosure is who's making, not any sort of oppressive regulation, just the disclosure of who's making the purchase. So we know that, and work, because sometimes there's sort of a front person in making these purchases. So the other thing we're working on, for full disclosure in this stuff, the other thing we're working on is how do you is to keep interests that are not looking out for us: North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China, essentially the 4 powers that are very hostile to American interests. How to keep them from buying up land near military bases. We have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. We have smaller military bases not far from where you are, Mansfield, Youngstown, Toledo, and Springfield. And I think it doesn't serve our national interests that an entity from one of those countries can come in and buy land adjacent to or near a military base. I know that this is not the subject of the call, but it's similar to me. One of the reasons I've called for a ban on Chinese electric vehicles sold in this country. It's partly about jobs. They'd be taking jobs from middle-class worker jobs in Ohio. It's also about national security. There's real concern with the complexity of electric vehicles, that just their presence in the United States, they can collect a lot of data on us personally. And I am in the process on something called FISA, on voting against the sort of government involvement in collecting data of citizens. And that concerns me every bit as much as it does, maybe not as much quite, but as it does the Chinese getting access to this data.
So getting back to the Farm Bill, is there anything specifically that you think folks need to know or understand? And what's your general feeling on what's going to happen in September with the Farm Bill?
I don't know what I think is going to happen. I've been part of a farm bill every 5 years. Sometimes it's 4.5, sometimes it's 5.5 years. The chaos in the House of Representatives with, they may have another speaker again. We've never seen anything like this. That's pushed everything back on what we should be doing. The chair of the committee in the Senate, our Democrat, and the ranking member Republican, I have very good relations with both of them. She is retiring the Senate chair. I think she'd like to get this farm bill done before she retires. That gives us additional impetus. I know the Republican ranking member wants to. And as I said, it's usually not a partisan thing. It's a regional thing. For instance, the ranking member is from Arkansas, and he cares a lot more about cotton than I do. I care a lot more about dairy and corn and soybeans and apples and not to mention, of course, maple syrup in Geauga County than he does. So we have these different regional, but we've always been able to, we're adults. We figure this out. As I said, it's not a particularly partisan committee. It's more regional. So I'm hopeful we can get this done. I don't want to make a prediction because you might show it in 3 months and I was wrong. I predict a little bit in baseball, but I don't predict in politics, and I don't predict bills in the Senate.
Right. September's a long way off. A lot can happen between now and then.
I didn't hear that one.
September's a long way off.
Yeah, September's long. Well, lots of things can happen. All right.
And if folks want to find out more, get in touch with your office, where can they go?
Yeah, Wes King in my office is our staff's the Agriculture Committee is really, really good. Wes King, KNG, get in touch with him. My state director is John Ryan and Ann Longsworth Orr, the two people in the state. So work with us, and we have regional people that work with. But as I said, the way I do this job on this committee, I mean, grew up working on a farm. I don't consider myself a farmer. I'm more interested, know more about farming than most of my colleagues, but I rely on farmers and to help me come up with ideas of what we should be doing on the Farm Bill. All right?
Anything else you want to get out there for folks?
That's it. Thanks, Amanda. Good
Thank
talking
you.
with you. See you.
Thank you
Okay.
for the
Bye.
time.
Thanks.
Bye.